thinking about like the mental toll, the emotional toll, the physical toll, and then going to the class of the faculty member knowing like, hey, she's not disinterested in this lecture. She's normally a very good student. I'm
Yeah,
going to give her a break because something else
it's going on.
is going on, is helpful to the unconditional regard that you talk about of giving that to student athletes. I think is really helpful. So if they are having an off day, they had a terrible practice, a terrible game, they got in super late, they're exhausted, whatever that is, of just saying, hey, I know that you're a great student. I appreciate you, and I can give you this break on the 8 a.m. that I'm not going to just assume that you're terrible.
Happy Tuesday, all. It is, let's see, it's May 11th, and in the rhythm of the academic year, everybody is super busy. But like somebody I was talking to the other day, we are on the home stretch, so that's exciting. We're kind of entering the end of the semester, and we're thinking about sending our students home, making sure they're registered, and then getting a little bit of a break. In fact, I know some of you have already sent your students home. So you kind of did away with spring break and you sent them home in April. So congratulations to you. For the rest of you, you're on the home stretch. I'm Rachel Phillips Buck, VP for Student Success at Pharos Resources, and you have joined me on Cap and Gown. Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. Today, we are going to be talking about an athlete's experience. So I have joined Shawna Nehl to come and talk about. She was not only an athlete, but also a coach. And so she's going to give us some insight into that. So if you are joining us on Zoom, thank you. Make sure you're subscribed on our YouTube channel. If you are watching us on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live every Tuesday at 2 so that you can participate in our polls and ask us questions. And if you are listening to us on a podcast, thank you. Always good to be able to spend time with you no matter what you're doing as you listen to us. So we have a pretty short episode today. I'm going to talk about State of the Union. We're going to ask some questions of Shawna. We are short today because we have our conference starting tomorrow. It's called Bridging the Gap. I want to encourage you all, if you have not joined us for that, if you've not registered, please do. It's going to be a great experience where we're spending time together talking about how we bridge the gap between academics and student development. I have been working really closely with our speakers. They are phenomenal in the work that they're doing. They have really amazing practices, really great philosophies, their partnerships with their faculty and with each other, and the ways that they've really been innovative in different practices and different things that they're doing on their campus, I think is going to be awesome. So we are talking about things like how to partner between academics and student development, how some things have been uncovered as broken that we're going to fix in the coming semesters and coming years. We are talking about how to create a great student success coaching team, how to build faculty buy-in on your campus using data to identify students who are struggling through retention intelligence, and then also a lot about our student success funnel, which you guys hear me talk about all the time. It's really the basis for student success work. Identify students, connect with them, solve their problems, measure that, and then pour that back in so that you can do an even better job. So please join us. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited. Lots of schools are going to be there and we cannot wait. But it means that we have a little bit of a shorter time together because there's so much going on in our office. So, of course, as always, I want to do our State of the Union. Just a couple of things to talk to you about today. First of all, a lot of schools are working on incentives for students to get their COVID-19 vaccine. So you guys remember that I told you, I think last week, it was like 290 schools were requiring COVID vaccination, and that's built on the premise that the FDA was going to approve it that it wouldn't just be approved under this kind of emergency measure. So now we're up to 322 schools, and Rachel is chatting you the link. It's the Chronicle of Higher Education. They have a link on their website that will tell you all of the schools that are requiring that COVID vaccine. And then also, we have a lot of schools that are being really creative for how they're incentivizing students to get the COVID vaccine. So, for example, Rowan University, which is in New Jersey, is offering $1,000 incentive for students to get their COVID vaccine. $500 of that is going towards course registration, and then the other $500 is going towards room and board. So that's really interesting. North Carolina at Greensboro, students are entered in a lottery to get free housing or textbooks or meal credits. So I think we're going to see more of that going on. It will be really interesting to see what schools are incentivizing and then what schools are making mandatory. I think that's kind of a scale in there. And then also remember that we talked before about how you want to just not just incentivize students to get it, but also make it accessible. So for students who maybe live further away or don't have time to take off work to be able to get the vaccine, how are you making that an easy process for them so that they can take advantage of some of those incentives you're offering? Another really interesting conversation that's happening here at the end of the spring semester is people who are working for college campuses are wondering about remote work, whether or not that's here to stay. So there's a great article in the Chronicle about a lot of committees at colleges and universities that are kind of evaluating the future of work and trying to figure out, can staff and faculty remain virtual at least in some way? So I think the consensus is obviously that doesn't work for everybody. We have certain positions where they have to be on campus. But it also seems like there's a very strong vote from college campuses that staff and faculty would like to have some flexibility in how they're working. So, for example, 3/4 of Duke University faculty and staff members said they would like to work remotely 3 to 5 days a week because it means they don't have to commute and they feel like they have higher productivity. Also, schools are thinking of this in terms of their ability to attract great professors and great professionals to their schools. So they're thinking that as kind of like a leverage or a bargaining chip to be able to say, hey, we give you a lot of freedom when it comes to, how you work and where you work. So the big question with that, which will be really interesting to see how it shakes out, is that an equitable sort of application? So are we saying staff will probably have to be on campus, but faculty will have more flexibility? Where are there positions where we say, obviously, people who are doing kind of service jobs have to be in person, but then maybe faculty have more flexibility? So I will be really interested to see how that shakes out, especially for smaller campuses. I think will be interesting. Hey, Marie, you joined us. Good to see you. Um, okay, and then the last piece of information that I want to tell you about in State of the Union is called, it's a report done by Digital Promise. Rachel is chatting that to you. It's called Suddenly Online. So it's a really long report that just goes through some data about what happened to undergraduates when they had to go online. I like this because it mirrors a lot of what we found in our survey that we did with Macmillan Learning, the very beginning of the pandemic, in terms of difficulties that students were having. But also a lot of studies looking at this are coming out on non-traditional students or students that opted in at least for online classes originally. And so this is a really different population. These are students who are undergraduate students who kind of were forced online in March 2020. So a couple of things to share with you from this, although I would encourage you to read the whole thing. It's really interesting. 50% or above of the students that were surveyed said they were unhappy with opportunities to collaborate with other students on online work. Keeping students interested in coursework, they said didn't do a great job of that. And then making students feel included as a member of the class. So 50% of students thought that online classes did a much worse job of that than in-person classes. Not really surprising. But then we had 50% or higher of students saying they had a clear understanding of what was expected of them in their course. Their instructor's knowledge of their strengths and their weaknesses was really clear. and they had available help within the course. So those are some positive things that came out of moving students to online. Um, Also, when we're thinking about equity issues, internet connectivity were serious enough to interfere with students' ability to attend or participate in their courses, at least occasionally, for 44% of students, and 16% of students experience those difficulties often or very often. So that's really interesting when you think about home internet and how we were all sharing it because we were working from home and we had lots of people home. And then one more thing, just in terms of device, I thought this was really interesting. 4 out of 5 students surveyed, so 79% used a laptop computer to access their course after COVID-19. A desktop computer was used by 15%, a tablet by 3%, and a smartphone by 2%. And 10% of our students had to share a device they were using to access the internet with another user. So, again, just insight into what that looks like, that experience. And as we're thinking about how to make education more accessible in the future, those are things that are going to help us kind of craft these long-term solutions to what's going on with our students and how they're able to participate in online or hybrid or some other form of classes that need technology. So I would encourage you to look at that report. I think it's really interesting. All right, that is the state of the union right now. Besides the fact that everybody is tired and we are ready for the semester to be over, I feel like this is maybe the first break that many of you are getting since March of 2020. So I know we are all looking forward to it. I want to talk today about an athlete's experience. So I'm going to invite Shawna Nehl. She's our Director of Client Development. Hi.
Hello.
I've invited her to join us because she has a really remarkable experience when we're talking about athletics. She was both an athlete and then later a coach. And so she has a really great perspective when it comes to what our athletes are going through. So she was a volleyball player for ACU. She was a great volleyball player for ACU.
I'm not 6'1". My husband loves to throw
What
that.
are you?
I'm 5'11". They just added that in there to, I don't know.
Shawna, I
Be
don't know about
intimidating.
that because I'm 5'11" and I think you're taller than me. We need to get up. We used to, in our office, we used to have like a height chart and then we moved offices, but we might need to go back to it.
Yeah. Well, I think whenever we had like the high heels on and things like that,
Yeah,
we
it
were like
changes things.
6'7". I don't know, somewhere in there. So
Well, Shawna and I have a great time because we are both tall, although she is taller than me, and we also both like to wear heels. So that's nice when we're both wearing heels. We're both very tall. But Shawna had a great career as a volleyball player. She won a lot of awards and did a great job for ACU. And then, so your undergraduate degree at ACU was what did you get in
marketing
business?
and management. Yeah.
Marketing and management. So she actually had Matt as her marketing professor, which is how we snagged her at Pharos. She was our intern and then helped us with sales and then left for a little bit and then came back and is now our director of client development. So she also normally is in a place that is much colder than Texas.
True. True. Yes. My husband's from the great north of Minnesota and just made me move back there.
Yeah. So, but this week she is in our office for a conference. So I'm really happy that she gets to be a guest today. So Shawna, I want to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about how athletes pick a school.
Okay.
I want to talk about what happens when an athlete gets cut from a team. And then I want to talk about sort of the misconception that faculty and student success people often have about athletes. And then for those of you who are joining us live, if you have any questions that you would like for us to ask Shawna, I'm happy to weave those in. Remind me, after you graduated, you went and you were a coach in Florida.
Yeah, University of West Florida. It's a D2 school just on the Panhandle in Pensacola, Florida.
And you did that for how many years?
For 2 seasons. So I got my MBA at the same time. So 2 full seasons with the volleyball team there.
Perfect. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and I'm always telling schools this, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it. When we're talking about admissions, oftentimes for admissions for athletes, you're getting recruited by a coach.
Mhm.
So, in fact, in some of our schools that have a large population of athletes, their coach recruiting is actually bringing in more students than their admissions counselors recruiting, right?
Yep.
Um, and so then a student gets recruited and they get brought in. But the truth is that they have a different hierarchy than our traditional student in terms of how they made a decision. So we're always talking about this hierarchy of number one, sport, like I want to play volleyball.
Yep.
Number two, the amount of money that you're going to offer me to play that sport.
Mhm.
And then number three, what is the school again? Right? And so this is like the decision tree that they walk through. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about that first in terms of how you pick a school. And then I want to talk about it in terms of what happens if one of these things get disrupted. So when you picked ACU, can you help me kind of, can you talk me through the decision process for you based on this idea of the hierarchy?
Yeah, yeah. So I knew of ACU because I had people that went there. So there was interest in the university, but I didn't know that much about the culture. It wasn't a typical experience of I love the culture. I love the campus. An admissions counselor has really told me all of these wonderful things about it. It was, I want to play volleyball somewhere. So I was doing my campus tours, talking to coaches and they're going through the recruiting process because I was going to play volleyball somewhere. So if it didn't happen at ACU, I would not have come here. I would have gone somewhere else. So it was very different on the decision tree of truly it was about where I was
Volleyball
going to play
first.
volleyball. Yep.
So at the next level, as you're thinking about like what is the scholarship that you're going to get, and you had academic scholarships as well as, did you just have academic scholarships or you also had a volleyball scholarship?
No, so I was half and half in the beginning. I did the presidential scholarship with ACU, and then volleyball was a smaller portion, and then they increased it to full ride at a certain point.
So you were definitely thinking about volleyball first, and then where am I going to go where I'm going to get a significant scholarship? And then also you said something interesting, which is how does choosing your coach fit into there? Because you're choosing the program, but you're for sure choosing your coach.
Yeah, well, I had a weird experience at ACU with that because the coach that recruited me then transitioned out the summer that I was leaving. So I didn't actually know Coach Mock, who she was wonderful, amazing friend to this day, but she actually wasn't the person that recruited me. So me and the people in my class, we always felt like the ugly stepchildren a little
Oh,
bit. We teased about it where we're like, she's so
you didn't
excited
pick
to
us.
yeah, she's so excited to bring in the people that she recruited and like having her athletes come in and everything. So that was a interesting experience that I had that most athletes don't. It is the coach has invested a lot of time coming to your club tournaments and talking to you on the phone. Like it's a very intense process
Yeah.
that I experienced on the coaching side. That's just a huge component of the coach's job of making sure that you're set for the next 5 years down the road of having a good roster.
So Shauna, if do you think that that would have been enough for an athlete? You get recruited by a coach and either they leave before you get to play under them, or after your first year they leave and they bring in a coach that you don't really like. Is that enough of an issue you think for some athletes to be like, I'm going to go find something else?
If I um if I didn't have a scholarship, probably. Or like if there was another school that
Could
it would
match it.
need to transition over to, but I
Yeah.
didn't really find out until it was pretty close. We were only a month out or so from starting our program. So there were quite a few barriers there. It
Yeah.
wouldn't have been an easy switch, but I for sure think that if there's a coaching disruption or a large conflict with a coach, especially in your freshman year, if you're not getting the playing time you want, the scholarship isn't what you want it to be. There's a lot of conflict with the coach and it's easy to transfer over. There is a lot of movement there,
Yeah.
especially the freshman and sophomore year for athletes.
So that's interesting. I might have to add to our hierarchy coach. I think coach maybe is between like scholarship and between school, right? Like hopefully you really like your coach, but if not, that might be a reason where you say like I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and I think this ties into some other things that we're going to talk about where the coach ends up being one of your biggest ties into the university. So, as an incoming freshman, you don't necessarily have that intense relationship with them where they're not the strongest tie, but you know them as an incoming freshman more than you really know what the campus culture is going to be
Yeah.
like, or you don't have friendships with other people and stuff like that. So they definitely, I agree with you that at that incoming freshman level, they are a step above the institution of just understanding kind of what your experience is going to be like.
Which is so interesting because the idea that your coaches, which, sometimes you have a misalignment. Sometimes you have a coach that has picked a school because they would hire them as a coach, but they don't necessarily understand the culture or that's not what they picked. And so it's really interesting to think about a coach truly being the most representative of a campus culture, when maybe they're like, I mean, I picked this school for the same reason you did because I wanted to
Yeah.
be in this particular sport. So it's a really interesting, I can't think of another position where that would be true, right, at a university.
Well,
So,
and to be the relationship for the entire length of the college career, right? Where I had different advisors based on like if it was for scholarship or if it was for
yeah,
the College of Business, things like that. So there were different connection points, but my coach was a consistent touch point relationship for me for my entire
the
college career.
entire time.
Yeah, they're the first ones to know if you're having relationship issues or if there's a team conflict or if you're not playing and you're really upset about it or if
Yeah,
there's an injury. I mean, they are like the
they know it all.
frontline defense of knowing what's going on with the athletes for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk about touch point relationships, but before we move on to that, did you have either as a coach or as a student athlete, did you have experience with somebody who was recruited or they came to play a sport and then it became really obvious that they are not going to be super successful or they're not first string or whatever, and then what kind of happens with them in terms of this hierarchy of like I picked the sport and now I'm starting to understand, I know that there are schools out there that are stacking their bench
Yeah.
for whatever sport 6 and 7 deep, right? And then you come and you're like, I picked this sport, but I see that I'm seventh in line.
Yeah.
What happens when you have that
Well,
conversation?
so my freshman year, we had two more players than jerseys. So that's like a terrible thing as a freshman, right? To come in and be like, here, these 15 players get a jersey, but you two, you're gonna share a locker and you don't
Oh,
get a jersey, like that just like is a stab to the heart for people. But it's very, very easy on a team as a player, but more so as a coach to be able to see, hey, this person is maybe not a culture fit for the team, or just they're never going to get playing time. And as a college athlete, the competitive spirit that you have, you're not satisfied
right.
just sitting on the bench, right? And so, and that was not a skill that I had. I was not, I really respect the people that are amazing bench players. They cheer their team on, they're encouraging. I love people like that because that's something that I look back on and I'm like, I wish that I redshirted my freshman year and I was pissed the entire year.
Let me play.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that I had that year to grow and then had 4 years of being able to be a starter, but that was not my temperament. I was so
Yeah.
competitive. I wanted to be on the court. And so you can see that as a player and then as a coach, like this person is not happy. And I'm really glad that I stuck it out and stayed at ACU. But every day, every practice, every game that I wasn't playing, I was going through like okay, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to be miserable. This is miserable not playing.
Yeah.
Should I
It's
go somewhere
interesting,
else?
Shauna, because you even knew, like, I mean, you redshirted. So it's not like
Yeah,
you're like not playing because you're not good enough. I'm just
right.
going to work harder and get better, right? It's like,
Yeah,
no, for the foreseeable future, I am not going to play. And it
yeah,
still was hard.
yeah.
Still, like, is there something we can do about this?
Yeah, so and as a coach too, it's this hard process because you've really invested in the athlete, you've recruited them, you thought that they were going to be a great cultural fit, but sometimes there's just but the team dynamics and everything, there just
Yeah.
is something that's not clicking there. And it's very easy to see, and you're talking with your team captains and things like that. So you know pretty early on when a player's not going to be successful. And there's this decision making then of, okay, are they going to help us be a practice player, and are they going to make our team better? Is their attitude just going to be a killer for the team then? Are they just going to be pissed on the bench and just, kind of hurt our team mentality that
Yeah.
way? Or, or do we just need to cut ties? And coaches just know what that decision is going to be, but I don't know if there was no support for, as a coach, we knew, and there was no really decision of, are we going to help
What do
this
we do?
athlete stay at the university? It was just kind of like all right, cut ties, they're not on the volleyball team anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's a really hard process, but really early on if a teammate's going to be successful.
Yeah, so I think that that's such an important thing to talk about because we're talking mostly to practitioners who are trying to find these students who maybe are not going to be successful in whatever. And we're always talking about anchor points. So usually your anchor points are RD, like for your res life, like you have your RA and your RD, and that's an anchor point. You're really
Yeah,
tied into your community that you're living in. We talk about majors. So different majors are anchor points. You think about theater, like you're anchored to those people. Nursing, you're really anchored there. Other majors where you say, like, this is a very tight group of students and this is where they're tied in,
yeah,
right? And then obviously this is true for athletics.
yeah,
And we're always talking about this idea that if somebody becomes untethered, so they have roommate problems, so we move them to a different floor, so they've lost their community, or they have to change their major, or they get cut from a team. And I was thinking about what you just said about, like, hey, I know you're not going to cut it. We think about like nursing or pre-med, right? Where we're like, listen, this biology class or this chemistry class is the one. And if you can't do well in it, we can try 3 more times,
yeah,
but I'm already concerned that you're not going to be able to succeed, which is really similar to what you're describing. Like, this skill or this what mentality or whatever is the thing.
yeah,
And if you're not doing well at that, I can already guess that we're going to have to be able to do something down the line.
yeah.
And so thinking about that in terms of academics, we're always talking about pathways.
Mhm.
So you're not going to be successful as a nurse or a doctor, but probably what you like about that is that you're being a practical helper to somebody. So what about speech pathology or occupational therapy or, right, some of those other things? For athletics, um, I think it's a harder problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because if I'm there to play a sport, there is not that replacement that you just talked about. There's not hey, this wasn't a great fit here. Let's try this other thing. Unless you're an amazing athlete that you can just, transition over
Yeah, right.
be a softball player. Um, there's not that just you love
Pathway out. Yeah.
volleyball, you can do this other thing here. It's a black or white, you're either doing it or you're not.
Yeah.
So if it's something that you're super passionate about and it's not going to work out at the university that you're at, you're probably going to transfer and go somewhere else. I would imagine, or at least from what I've seen, it's very hard to have a different tie-in that's so big on the campus that you're at that you're going to stay
Regardless.
or trying to find another sport.
Yeah.
Because that really, I mean, coming in as a freshman, I didn't go to orientation. I barely knew anyone on my hall.
Right.
All of the U100, they like the tight knit
First
class
year
that,
experience.
yes,
Yeah.
they all did their thing together. I went to like two of those because you're traveling and you have practices, and you're doing two a days during orientation and stuff like that for the fall sports. And so there, my tie to ACU was through my team. So if you took that away, I'm like walking around not knowing anybody on campus. Not a big reason for me to stay.
Right. I mean,
Later
it's
on,
basically you're like a transfer student,
yeah,
right? If we take that away, you're like, and if I'm going to be a transfer student, I might as well transfer to someplace where I don't know anyone, but at least maybe I
yeah,
have an opportunity to play the sport that I love.
exactly. Yep.
So really, I think you might have some leeway with athletes who maybe are not thinking about their athletic career as the reason that they've come to college, which I think you have two different kinds of athletes. You have some athletes whose ultimate goal is to play whatever their sport is professionally,
Hmm.
and whether or not they finish their college degree career with a degree, that doesn't make any difference to them, right? They're
Right.
basically in college because they want to be able to be furthered in this athletic endeavor.
Yep.
And then you have other students who, I don't know. I mean, it still seems like a very hard sell to say, hey, you love this sport. I know that it's only going to be 4 more years that you're going to play it, but we have a great business degree.
Mhm.
And if you will just early say, like, I know I'm not going to be an athlete forever, but I
Right.
really love this degree that I'm getting, maybe there's a little more leeway with that kind of athlete for us to hook them in and say, please stay in our community.
For sure. And I think there's a difference between the freshman experience too of coming in where you don't have the other connections versus a junior or senior. I do have teammates that they walked away like, okay, my major, I'm trying to do pre-med. This is intense. I'm not getting the playing time that I need. I'm going to walk
Yeah,
away and stayed at the university. Experiences like that where there's other ties into the university later on in your career. But that the freshman, especially for a fall sport, your only tie really is the sport on campus. So yes, I 100% agree. There's opportunities to tie in the students, get them incorporated. You are incorporated in the culture later on in
right.
other aspects rather than your sport, but the freshmen, especially that first semester, I think is just maybe the hardest cohort there to
For
get
sure.
integrated in.
And I just think, practically speaking, I mean, what that helps me understand is, first of all, we probably should be very, very careful about isolating our freshmen within athletic groups. So, figuring out ways to give them experience outside of those teams. Although I can understand why coaches are like, hey, but we're spending all of this time together for sure. But if we're talking about, especially coaches maybe who are over recruiting, being able to say, like, hey, we do have to figure out other ways when they're a freshman to make sure that they are connected to people other than you.
Yeah.
And then also, I would be, because I have never heard before, so I'm really curious. I'm gonna have to vet this out, Shawna.
Okay.
The idea that coaches very early can tell you, these three are probably not gonna, they're probably gonna get cut. And I think on the practitioner side, what we like, how we experience that is a student gets cut 6 weeks in and we don't know. And then they're like, hey, I'm going to leave. And we're like, wait, what's happening? Is there something we can do at this point? So I understand the cautiousness of a coach to not want to say super early. Like, I don't want to tell somebody, hey, I'm going to cut Shawna and then you're not going to get cut for 6 weeks. That's not a good move, right? But somehow thinking about what kind of careful language can we have to say, listen, I don't think she's going to make it on the team. We have a couple of weeks before that comes to a head. And there surely is some way that we can get her involved in residence life or in clubs or with her freshman class or something like that, so that when that happens, it's not a free fall. We've actually laid the groundwork for you to be able to at least consider, maybe I want to stay because I have some other connections, you know?
Yeah, because that turnaround is so quick. At least at ACU and UWF, it was a end of the semester meeting where you're finding out if your scholarship's being increased, if it's staying the same, if it's getting eliminated or reduced, giving notes to the players about how they did. And then the turnaround, then if your scholarship got reduced or cut down, or you've gotten a lot of trouble with the coach, whatever that is, there's not a lot of time then till the end of the semester where if they're
They're gone.
transferring, support services don't kind of have that road to build up and help them. It's an, oh, you're leaving next
They're cut.
week
They're
and
cut
I
and they're
wasn't
gone.
part of the communication. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have talked to schools before about even just when a student gets cut like mid-semester to then be able to tell support services, hey, this happened. But I think it's a much better play to say we want to have a closed door meeting with the coach and we're going to be really sensitive about how we're talking about this, but also please give us your list of students that you're concerned about. And those are maybe students that we're going to be paying more attention to, and at least that we would have an opportunity for them to love our community or love our culture or love our school
Yeah.
and consider staying part of us, even if they're not going to be successful in their sport.
Yeah, it would be such an amazing practice thinking about on the coaching side of just having that resource of a meeting maybe in the middle of the semester with, I don't know if it's the director of student success or like who that resource would be. It's probably different on every campus of just sitting down and going through a roster. I think of it like a behavioral intervention team
Yeah,
or a retention committee that they just kind of have their list of students. Because as a coach, I could have said, hey, these 10, they're good, they're happy, nothing's going on. But these five, we are like, they're having relationship issues or the team conflict is just they're not a good fit for whatever reason. All of the information, if we
yeah,
had something like Ferris 360, that would have been really easy to share. But
right.
just having a sit down meeting as a best practice, as kind of like a low barrier to success
Yeah,
there, of being able to just provide that information in a 30-minute dump there
right. You
would
just
be
need to know. Yeah,
yes. Just, these five students are really struggling, I think is something that easily can be implemented on any campus and would have a huge
yeah.
increase of success there.
And I think coaches would appreciate it because you have, I mean, what you said about like, hey, I recruited these students because I thought they were going to be successful, but now I'm looking around and I'm thinking, no, and my only options are to like stiff arm them and be like, sorry, you're not part of us anymore,
Yeah.
or to just let them stay and be like, this isn't working great. So even giving coaches an outlet to say, hey, we can still care for them even if they're not your priority because they're not going to be on your team anymore. If I were a coach, I would feel much happier about that instead of just being
Sure.
like, yeah, sorry, good luck, I'm leaving
Yeah.
you to the lions, right?
Yeah. Well, because as a coach, you feel like there's just a lot of responsibility that you feel for your athletes too of you're kind of your mom, dad, your counselor, your friend, your a mentor, you're a disciplinary person in their life. Like there's just so many hats that
Yeah,
you wear. You build these really deep relationships and you know the ins and outs of their lives and what's going on and you want them to be successful. But I didn't feel as a coach that I had the tools or the resources other than just trying to support them the best we could, having the rules of study time and things like that, helping them get to tutors. There, I just didn't feel like I knew what else on campus I could do to help
yeah,
them.
yeah. So that's a great segue into another thing that I want to talk about, which is so often on a campus, um, there's like a weird vibe about athletes, which I don't fully understand. Um, and it's, Matt and Vivo, when they work in retention intelligence, they're going through, and it's always really interesting because they're like, hey, so tell us who you think your most at risk students are. And faculty, a lot of time, like athletes are your most at risk students. It's just like this anecdotal athletes are our most at risk.
Sure.
And oftentimes when they dig into the data, no, that is not true. They are not your most at risk. Um, and Faculty sometimes are surprised about that. I think student support is sometimes surprised about that. I personally always loved when I had an athlete because anything that was going wrong, there was a person I could call
Yep.
and be like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about Shawna," and Shawna's problems would miraculously like disappear because coaches are so good at everything that you just said. Like, I am your person. You are going to learn to be disciplined. You're going to learn to do what I ask you.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier, like, good coaches have rules and set up parameters for their athletes when it comes to academics, right? So, I mean, some of those rules for you that your coaches were setting up were what kinds of things?
Yeah, so sit on the first one or two rows of the class, introduce yourself to faculty in the first day so they knew, hey, or I'm an athlete, but I'm going to be invested in your class. I am going to miss, but hey, I'm a good student. You're going to love me. Just trying to build a relationship. We had designated study hall times on trips that we went on. We had to have a certain GPA to be able to play that was higher than just the NCAA requirement
Mhm.
of not being suspended. So those are just some of the ones off the top of my head of just, and the coach can give you consequences too. Like you have someone that is holding you accountable to those rules as well, where if you think about, hey, this just student, not a student athlete, the student didn't show up to their tutoring appointment. There's no consequence that anyone
Right.
can give you. My coach can make me show up at the track at 6 a.m. and run sprints if I don't
Yeah.
do what they want
Yeah.
me to do, or they
Well,
can take away my scholarship.
right. I mean, I think that's the issue of like no, so I'm always saying in parenting, like you have to know your kid's currency. You have to know. Like my mom, I'm an introvert. My mom would always be like, if you don't clean your room, you have to stay home and you can't see people all weekend. And I was like,
Cool.
okay, don't take my books away because then I'll clean my room, right? But with athletes, you have like a very clear currency. Like,
Yeah.
this is the thing I love that I'm invested in. And if
Yeah.
you are not doing what you're supposed to, this is the way that you're going to have to pay for it. And you're going to do everything you can to avoid that.
Yeah.
Whereas an average student has to have more natural consequences. You fail the class or you can't major in what you want to, but those take a while to show up.
Yeah.
Whereas for a coach, it's like tomorrow you're going to come early and run, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's so interesting, the stigma about athletes being underperformers or things like that, because those are people that have worked their butts off to play a college sport.
Yeah.
Like that is, I think the statistic is 1% of high school athletes go on to be college athletes.
Yeah.
And so they have an insane work ethic.
Right.
And so being able to have that perspective from faculty rather than this
They're
athlete's
probably
never
just,
going to come to
yeah.
my class and they're going to suck, I think is a really great shift. And I was telling you earlier that the faculty members that really invested in my sport as well came to the games, asked me how we did on away games, or when I came into class with crutches on, really asked me what happened and what was
Yeah.
going on. We're invested in that. Just in the process with me, made a huge impact on my life and my investment in the university, in their class. I would look forward to going to their class because I wasn't just a nameless, faceless person sitting there. They expected great things of me, as did my coach.
Yeah. I love that because when we're talking about the success funnel, identify, connect, solve, measure, right? And that connect piece with an athlete is so easy.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just have to say, like, I saw your block, or you scored these points, or oh my gosh, that was meant. Like, it's
Yeah.
so easy. In fact, I
Yeah.
was just talking to a school where I was teaching them about Connect, and Mason came back and he was like, hey, I looked up the student athlete. I found out what his position was. And I said, you're going to score points on Saturday. And he was like, oh, yeah, we're so excited about this game. It's just such an
Yeah.
easy way to say, I see you and I'm concerned about you and I'm rooting for you.
Yeah.
That is, I think, much harder when you have to dig to try to figure out what is the student interested in and what are they really passionate about.
Yeah.
So and also, I think if we published athletes' schedules in terms of like what time you're waking up, when you're going to breakfast, what you're practicing, then you go to study, then you go to class, then you like, I think people would be absolutely shocked at the rigor of the days.
Yeah.
Um, And also, Shauna, we so often see um, character traits in student athletes after they graduate. Like, I want to hire a student athlete every day
Yeah.
because they set goals, they're competitive, they know how to work hard, they don't take things for granted. I mean, there's just so many character traits that being a student athlete helps you develop,
Yeah.
that set you up for success, not just academically, but also in the real world,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said about knowing their schedule and stuff too, because I remember there were so many late night road trips where we got in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and our coach was like, "You will be in your 8 o'clock class. I will check." And we had just gotten our butts kicked. And so thinking about like the mental toll, the emotional toll, the physical toll, and then going to the class of the faculty member knowing like, hey, she's not disinterested in this lecture. She's normally a very good student. I'm
yeah,
going to give her a break because something else
it's going on.
is going on, um, is helpful to the unconditional regard that you talk about of giving that to student athletes, I think is really helpful. So if they are having an off day, they had a terrible practice, a terrible game, they got in super late, they're exhausted, whatever that is, of just saying, hey, I know that you're a great student. I appreciate you, and I can give you this break on the 8 a.m. that I'm not going to just assume that you're a terrible
Yeah.
student because you're an athlete or whatever is a helpful mental
Which,
switch.
Shauna, is, I mean, what I think is most helpful about what you just said is that faculty don't always understand that. And perhaps that's why athletes get a bad reputation, because because we don't know enough to say, oh my gosh, you just got in after getting beat yesterday. You just got in at 3 a.m. and you're at my class, which I promise you, people who stayed up late last night playing video games or, talking to their roommate gave themselves the pass this morning to not have to come to this class, right? So we sometimes don't know enough to be able to say, I understand that there's something going on with you that's different. And so my interpretation of that is that you're going to be that, yeah, you came to class, but you're not paying attention, or you seem really tired, or you're not answering my questions.
Yeah.
And in actuality, we should be giving some credit for the fact that you had this full experience and you came to class, instead of saying like, oh, well, I get a pass because I got in, 3 hours ago. I'm still tired.
Yeah. Which again is amazing to have a coach connection on campus that has that power to say you will be in class in 5 hours, rather than, yeah, just I want to sleep in
I'm
until
tired. Yeah. That's
yeah.
why coaches are so helpful. I always say, like, everybody needs a good coach to be like, I both am going to appreciate you and help you grow. And also, when you do something that you shouldn't do, or when you're thinking about doing something you shouldn't do, I'm going to help you make a good
Yeah.
choice.
You're gonna run for a while.
Yeah. Think about that and even take some laps. It's good. Well, I really appreciate just shedding some light on that experience. Like I said, both as an athlete, as and a coach, because it is a really different perspective and daily schedule and experience for athletes. And it's really interesting. The part of the friction, I think, is that you have faculty members who love academics and have committed their life to it, in the same way that you have athletes who love athletics and have committed their life to it. And so there is a little bit of friction where, like, I don't really understand why you're doing everything you're doing,
Yeah.
but I can understand loving so much that you say, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to get my PhD and it's going to take me years and I'm going to become the best at this.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a place for empathy and understanding there, as we say, like, oh, you love this thing as much as I love, my academics.
Yeah.
And we are both cut from the same cloth in terms of how we are going to run hard after that thing,
Yeah.
and develop character because of it,
Yeah.
So I think it's really enlightening. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite. This was fun.
Yeah. So you guys, listen, we will be back next week. I don't know if Anthony is going to be with us next week because he has something else on his calendar that he's trying to figure out. but he will be joining us for Bridging the Gap tomorrow. He's going to be doing our keynote speaker session. And so if you have not registered for that, please do. We're really excited. We've got a great group of schools. We are going to be talking about Kintsugi in the coming weeks and also tomorrow. Love for you to register. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have to say. I don't think so. I think, this is a QR code for all of our speakers for Bridging the Gap. So if you want to look through and see some of their sessions and what they're talking about before they join, we'd love for you to do that. And Robert, yes, our conference is going to be recorded. And Shawna, I don't remember. If you register, we're going to send it all out to you. Is that what we're doing with that?
Yep. So register for the conference, and then all of the sessions will be packaged up and sent to any attendees or registrants.
Yeah. So, and then if you have people on your campus who you think would be interested in it, we'd love for them to register as well, and we'll send them all of that to review later. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Always good to spend time with you, and we will see you next week.